In 1939, Hitler invades Poland from the west and Stalin invades it from the east, so they divide the country between them. Polish army officer Janusz has been captured by the Soviets, who want him to sign a document that claims he's a spy. Since this is a lie, Janusz refuses to sign. At that moment the soldiers bring Janusz's wife, who has been tortured to the point she calls Janusz a spy too. He cries as he denies it, but the soldiers have a document she signed detailing all his sabotage activities. In Siberia in 1940, Janusz and various prisoners are taken to a labor camp. They're told that Siberia itself is their prison because the camp is surrounded by harsh nature, so nobody can survive out there if they try to escape. Fugitives also get bounties on their heads, meaning the locals may kill them too. Then all the prisoners' heads are shaved. When it's time for dinner, they're given very small bowls of a watery stew. Many men have night blindness because of a vitamin deficiency. Smith accidentally drops some food and a desperate prisoner tries to grab it, but Smith quickly steps on it to protect it. Janusz takes pity on the guy and shares his own food, so Smith scolds him, saying that kindness can kill him here. After Smith walks off, Khabarov tells Janusz that Smith is an American who was captured just for being a foreigner. Janusz shares that he was given a 20-year sentence on fake espionage charges, and Khabarov explains that he's an actor who was arrested for playing an aristocrat in a movie. In the dorms, Vaka is playing cards for money. Khabarov tells Janusz that these are professional criminals and guards let them run things here, so everyone fears them. Some other prisoners were caught as slave labor. Janusz wonders about the possibility of escaping, but Khabarov says it's impossible and warns him that Stalin has eyes and ears everywhere. At that moment Vaka asks another prisoner for his jacket. When the guy tries to stand up to him, Vaka pulls out a knife and stabs him. Then other men take the guy's sweater and pass it to Vaka, who uses it to pay his debt. As days pass, Janusz gets used to the routine in the camp. The prisoners must spend their time mining or chopping wood in the snow. They're given little food and their sleeping quarters aren't warm at all. They aren't given new clothes either, so a prisoner fixes his broken shoes with candle wax. One night, Janusz finds lice in his clothes. Khabarov says he has an old folk remedy and makes him follow him outside. At that moment they hear an explosion, but it's just the mines. While Khabarov buries some clothing in the snow, Janusz stares at the watchtowers and thinks about escaping. Khabarov reveals his friend Lazar may get them out, so they start discussing ideas. Their safest option is to go south to Mongolia, however they'll need to stockpile food and wait for the autumn weather. Afterward Khabarov starts exchanging cigarettes for food, which he hides under a loose floor plank. Janusz checks on the buried clothes and discovers that all the lice have piled up there. Sometime later the soldiers are trying to take the prisoners to work, but a heavy snowstorm is making it hard to walk and some men collapse. The soldiers make the prisoners lie down for a while, saying they don't care if they die. When Smith complains he gets a gun pointed at his head, but he ignores the guard and walks toward the forest. Then the soldiers decide to also take the group to the forest to take shelter. The prisoners quickly put a bunch of branches together to build a small shelter and invite Smith to join them. The next day, Smith and Janusz are two of the many prisoners chosen to work in the mines. There they have to deal with constant coughing because it's hard to breathe. They also have to move quickly to dodge debris whenever it falls. The lack of air causes Janusz to fall and start hallucinating about his home. He walks toward it to try to reach it and almost crosses the exit in the real world, so a guard gets ready to shoot. Luckily Smith pulls him back just in time. As thanks, Janusz tells him about Khabarov's plan, but Smith says that Khabarov has been preying on newbies for years with the same empty promises. However, if Janusz insists on escaping, Smith agrees to go with him. That night, Janusz drags Khabarov out of bed to show him that the storm is strong enough to cover their footprints, so they should leave now. However, Khabarov insists it can't be done, mentioning excuses like the food not being enough yet. Janusz starts to wonder if his stories are true, but at that moment they're seen by Vaka, so they go back inside. Meanwhile, Andres learns that Kajik has been hiding his night blindness. Kajik swears he sees perfectly fine during the day and he could hold on to Andres' shoulder at night. He asks Andres to keep his secret so he can still be part of the escape plan. Meanwhile, Smith gives his gold watch to Lazar in exchange for information on how to escape. Lazar tells them they must stop the generator, which will give them 10 minutes of darkness to escape. This must be done during the change of the final watch. While the group waits for the right hour, Vaka suddenly jumps on Janusz and puts a knife to his neck. He explains he owes a lot of money to the other gamblers, so he wants to escape too. Janusz agrees to take him along only because he's under threat. When the time finally comes, the prisoners turn off the generator and cut some wires on the fence to escape. The alarm is quickly raised, but thanks to the storm, the guards have poor visibility and no sign of their footprints. They enter the forest with their dogs, hoping their noses will find the fugitives. The 7 prisoners are running as fast as possible through the woods. Eventually they get too tired to keep going, so Janusz reminds them that the dogs are fast and encourages them to keep moving. They try again, but the snow is blinding them, so they want to find shelter. Janusz refuses to stop now because this storm will stop the guards from finding them. He takes Vaka's knife and cuts bark strips from the trees, which they use as masks to protect their faces from the snow. Now they can keep walking without issues. Sometime later, when the storm finally stops, the group takes a break and puts all their resources together. Janusz notices that Vaka is wearing Kabarev's jacket, so Vaka explains that Kabarev almost betrayed them. However, Vaka managed to keep him quiet and took all his food. When they start traveling again, Smith privately tells Janusz that bringing Vaka was making a deal with the devil. They can hear howling in the distance, but it's only wolves. Days start to pass and Janusz guides the group by checking the moss and the sunlight for directions. Vaka is very impressed and promises to always protect him. The next time they take a break, Janusz explains that they still have 3 or 4 weeks to arrive at the local lake. There's only 1 week left of food, so they'll have to hunt or fish. Vaka wants to rob farms but the others refuse. Meanwhile, Kajik goes looking for wood but night falls, so his sight fails him and he gets lost. He starts wandering as he looks for the way back to camp, however the cold causes him to hallucinate. He sees his old teacher by his side and a city in the distance, thinking they've finally made it. When the others finally find him, they're devastated to see that Kajik has frozen to death just a few meters away from the camp. The group buries him and says a few words, although Vaka annoys everyone by pointing out that now they have 1 fewer mouth to feed. A few weeks later, the men are so desperate for food that they're grabbing bugs and eggs from nests. They're too exhausted to keep going, so they take shelter in a cave, where Tomasz starts drawing on the walls to stay sane. One night, Vaka asks Janusz who will die first and makes some comments that imply cannibalism. Suddenly they hear a noise and discover some wolves feeding on a dead animal. The men run and yell together, waving their sticks at the wolves until they run away in fear. Then Janusz watches how all his friends start eating directly from the animal's body like savages. Tired of this, Janusz decides to leave alone to find the lake and tells the others that if he doesn't return in a week, they must leave without him. After walking for a long while and hiding from the rain, Janusz starts having hallucinations again. However, a few days later he returns to the camp and tells the group that he's found the lake. After Janusz recovers from this journey, the group leaves together and walks for 3 days until they get to the lake. After freshening up, they start making their way to the border. While crossing the woods, they notice that someone is following them. They surround the person and Vaka almost attacks, but Janusz stops him just in time. The mysterious person is a Polish girl named Irina, who has escaped from a Russian farm and has been following them because she needs food and protection. Janusz wants to bring her along, but the group refuses because they don't have enough food and she'll slow them down. Later the men find an animal stuck in the mud and capture it for dinner. However, Andres notices something and leaves the group behind. In the evening he comes back with Irina, who is allowed to travel with them now. The next morning they manage to mix a few things to make soap and finally get to wash all their clothes. They also get a nice shave, although Vaka refuses their help and does it himself. Sometime later they discover that part of the lake is frozen. The ice appears to be thin and weak, but Irina runs on it anyway and reaches the other side. This inspires the men to follow her. They slip and fall a few times, but they do reach the other side safely, so now they can continue their journey. While traveling through the woods, Smith asks Irina about her past and she says her parents were murdered by Russian soldiers. However, Smith notices a few inconsistencies in her story and realizes she's lying. She's actually from Jerem territory. He'll let it pass for now but makes her promise she won't lie again. Sometime later they see a town in the distance and think about sneaking in to get some food. However, they conclude they can't risk being recognized, so they'll have to walk around it through the woods. In the evening, the group realizes Vaka is gone and wonders if he betrayed them. At that moment Vaka comes back and Smith furiously jumps on him to insult him. Vaka empties his bag to reveal a bunch of dead animals and admits he had to kill a dog, but reminds everyone this is their only chance of survival. He also pulls out a bottle of alcohol he stole, saying it's his birthday. During dinner, Vaka sings a traditional folk song and Irina sings along, making him realize she lived on the streets like him. Now everyone finally knows she's been lying, so she shares the true story. Her parents were Polish communists who chose to live in Moscow to work for the revolution. They were arrested in 1937 under spy charges and their kids were sent to an orphanage. When Irina's brother died, she decided to run away. The next day the journey continues and the group is harassed by mosquitoes, causing them to end up with deformed faces because of all the bites. When they see some locals walk by, they notice that the mosquitoes don't follow them. They must stay hidden to avoid capture, but Zoran decides to come out and ask a man for his secret. The man gives him a necklace that keeps the mosquitoes away, and now the group can keep traveling in peace. More days pass and Irina chats with everyone to learn their stories. Andres is a priest, Tomasz is a pastry chef who wants to be an artist, Zoran is an accountant who was arrested for taking a picture of the Kremlin, and Smith is an engineer who moved to Russia because of the depression. His son was shot when he was arrested. During their next break, Irina takes care of the wounds on Smith's feet with a piece of fabric she rips off her skirt. Eventually they reach some train tracks and Janusz explains that the border is on the other side around 4 days away. There are lots of farmers and guards in the area, so they'll have to cross after nightfall. While they wait, Vaka keeps staring at his cross. Zoran mocks him for having a tattoo of Stalin and Vaka jumps on him, so the others have to separate them before things escalate. A few hours later, the group is happy to finally cross the border into Mongolia. However, Vaka is loyal to Stalin, so he decides to stay in Russia. He and Janusz shake hands and wish each other good luck before parting ways. The group is in a great mood as they walk through the desert on their way to the capital city. However, things get sour again when they see a sign that reveals that Mongolia is now under communist control. They stay in the desert instead of going to the city and eventually find a Buddhist temple. Thinking that monks may be neutral, the group goes inside only to discover that the place has been destroyed. After finding several skulls buried in the ground, Andres shares that the same thing happened in Russia. Priests were shot or arrested and religion was banned. Andres' church was destroyed like this, and when he found it, he killed a very young guard in fury. The group discusses what to do and decides they'll have to cross China to reach India. For the next few weeks, they keep on walking through the desert under the scorching sun. One day they're suddenly surrounded by horse riders, so the group pretends to be American pilgrims on their way to Tibet. Luckily the riders believe them and leave. Moments later they're found by a young rider, who was sent by the others to give them a water bag. Days continue to pass and the group uses branches and pieces of fabric to protect their heads and feet from the sun. They also have to ration the water very carefully, but they end up running out anyway. Smith thinks he sees some trees in the distance, but Janusz explains it's just a mirage and wants to keep moving south. When Smith freaks out, the others quickly calm him down and decide to follow him. After walking for a while, they see a bird flying above them, which proves they aren't imagining things. The group gets excited and runs as fast as possible until they find a well. They drink lots of water and camp there for the night. In the morning, they fill as many bottles and pots as possible with water and go back to walking south. A few days later, the group panics when they encounter a sandstorm. They run to the nearest dune and take cover the best they can as the storm passes over them. Thankfully they survive the incident, but they've lost all their water and Irina and Tomasz are very sick. Smith wants to return to the well, but Janusz thinks it's impossible to find it in a land without features. As the journey continues, the men start sucking on rocks to feel less thirsty. Suddenly Irina collapses and the guys notice her legs are swollen. She says she's being a nuisance, however the others refuse to abandon her. They keep walking and soon Irina falls again, yet she refuses to take a break. Andres decides to start carrying her. A few hours later Irina asks Andres to put her down. She gives everyone one last look before she finally dies. The guys bury her in the sand and pray for her before they continue traveling. With every day that passes, the injuries on their feet get worse. Tomasz tries to keep the mood up by drawing portraits of everyone and makes a very beautiful one of Irina's smile. This is his last creation before he dies too, and he receives the same burial. A few days later Janusz sees some hills in the distance and says they should go there for water. Smith is too tired to move and tells them to leave without him. Janusz sends Zoran and Andres ahead while he stays with Smith, who has collapsed. In the evening, Janusz manages to drag Smith to their friend's camp. Unfortunately the duo hasn't found water. The next morning Zoran wakes up when he feels a snake moving between his legs. He starts following it until he finds a tiny puddle of water. The men lie down to drink from it and pour some into Smith's mouth since he can't move. Then they kill the snake and cook it for lunch. While eating, Andres loses a tooth. That night Smith tells Janusz that they should leave him behind and says this is his punishment for what happened to his son. However, Janusz refuses to abandon him and shares his hope to see his wife again. The next day Smith is inspired enough to keep going, and the group is lucky enough to find a river. This allows them to regain enough strength to head to the hills, and eventually they cross the Great Wall of China to reach the Himalayas. In these snowy mountains, they find a small monument marking Tibet. Sometime later, the group is found by a monk who confirms India is close before taking them to his Buddhist monastery. They finally get to eat real food again while the leader of the monks tells them that they should wait for spring to go to India since a snowstorm could kill them. Before bed, Janusz says they should leave now, but the others agree with the monk and want to wait. Then they share what they'll do in the future. Andres wants to join the fight against Germany and Russia, Zoran wants to take Tomasz's pictures to a newspaper, and Janusz can't return to Poland so he'll just keep walking. Smith wants to go home, so he'll go to southwestern China where one of the monks' contacts will smuggle him back to America. The next morning Janusz decides to leave alone. When Zoran and Andres notice, they say goodbye to Smith and go after their friend. Sometime later the trio finally reaches India and are received warmly by the locals, who immediately offer their help. For the next 50 years, Janusz continues to walk around the world. In 1989 Poland is finally free. Janusz finds his old home and opens the door with a hidden key. Inside he's happy to find his wife waiting for him. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.